How We Make Movies is brought to you by Microsoft Surface, Assimilate, Azo, Moviola, and Canon Hollywood. It's shot in front of a live audience in Los Angeles and hosted by the film collective We Make Movies. Welcome back to How We Make Movies. I'm your host, Amanda Lippert, and this is the show where we talk to real filmmakers about the ins and outs of getting their movies made and getting people like you to sit down and watch them. Our guests today are director Peter Sanders and editor Clark Harris, and they're here to talk to us about their documentary, Altina. Altina Schinasi was a New York heiress and artist known for inventing the Harlequin glasses in the 1930s and for her unique brand of functional sculpture, which she called characters. Sanders' previous film, The Disappeared, was chosen by the government of Argentina to represent the country at a conference on human rights sponsored by the United Nations and was later broadcast on the History Channel. Altina was released theatrically in September at the IFC Theater in New York and at the Laemmle Music Hall Theater in Los Angeles. Please give a warm welcome for Peter and Clark. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about Altina. I described it a little bit, but I want to hear from your point of view.
Well, Altina is a special lady to me because she is my grandmother. And I am a third-generation filmmaker, which means that my grandmother, by accident, was talking to her husband at the time in 1955, and she decided to make a movie called Interregnum about George Gross's life in Germany in between the wars. And so she made a movie, her only movie, and got nominated for an Academy Award in 1960. And it was a brilliant movie, which I hope everyone will someday see because I've seen many, many shorts, and this is by far one of the most beautiful shorts ever made. And so I basically my grandmother became a filmmaker, and she raised two boys, and both of my father and my uncle became filmmakers, and they won an Academy Award very young at 23. The first student academy. They were students at UCLA, so they were the first students ever to win an Academy Award while still being at school at UCLA, and that catapulted their careers enormously, and they went on to win more Academy Awards. And so 40 years later, I decided that I would like to make a movie about my grandmother and to honor her life and my, obviously, some of the relatives as well. And so Altina is a portrait about this incredible life that she had as an heiress, as a social activist, as a political activist, as an artist, as a sculptor, as a painter, as a wife to many men. She had a very, very exciting sex life, which we'll get to at some point tonight.
We're not there yet.
Not there yet.
It was an Oz.
Hang in there. And so it was really an easy thing to want to make a movie about her because she lived such a full life, and she had so many friends and interesting things that happened to her. It was really like, just don't mess it up. That's all I had to do, was just not mess up her life.
It was already good. It was going to be great. You
Yeah.
just had to not mess it up.
The recipe was already perfect. All I had to do was just add a couple of things here, make little things happen. I mean, it's not that simple, but making a film is not simple. But she was a good character to make a movie about.
Well, that's a lot of pressure because you came in at the end, and now you have all that on your shoulders not to mess it up. Clark, how did you get involved in the film?
Well, I initially came in just to cut the trailer, but in cutting the trailer, Pete kind of had a rough cut of sorts assembled. But Pete's Final Cut skills are rudimentary. So to put it gently,
Wow.
so like I kind of helped him organize the footage, and so in the process of making the trailer, we basically watched all the footage.
Yeah.
And I helped him kind of categorize it and sort it into bins and whatnot. And so then at the time we thought that was going to be that. And then later I just came on more and more to work here and there. And by the time you know it, I kind of got the whole movie.
Well, now you guys have heard enough about this amazing woman. You want to see a little bit about her? You want to see the trailer? All right, let's watch it.
I mean, I don't know who decreed that art should just be something that you nail up on a wall. I don't see it.
I never thought I was a great artist at all. I'm not a great artist.
But I knew I had a gift and a talent.
She created a niche. And in arts, if you create a niche, you're important.
There was something that was unfulfilled, and she had turned it to art.
My father, he was a tobacco magnate.
I think the money was very nice, but I don't think it made her the person she was.
I fell in love with her the minute I met her.
Of course you're in love with Tina. Everyone's in love with Tina.
You would have to put together a cast of about a dozen women to come up with one Tina.
Sí, ella le gustaba mucho el programa de sexología. Ahí ella había que darle 100 puntos, ¿sabe? Excelencia había que darle.
I never quite know after I'm through with something what I want to do next.
She was inspired to do something different, and that sure enough was something very different because no one had seen them before.
And the Harlequin glasses, a woman could keep the eyeglasses on and still look chic.
And I got quite a lot of publicity.
I thought they were dead ugly.
Her film Interregnum was an homage, really, to George Grosz, who's very anti-Nazi.
Then we met King. We had a script going to fully cooperate with us in any way.
Jack Barry, he was a friend of ours who was a director who was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee. Tina said he could hide out at our house, so I thought that was gutsy.
I did have a thread all through the life that made me want to be an individual and make something of myself.
It's all passion, 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 passion. Sex, 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 sex.
You got a lot of the highlights in there. After seeing the movie and then going back and watching the trailer, you can see like how much you have to squish into 3 minutes. What prompted you to make this movie?
What prompted me to make this movie was I had come off the nice success of The Disappeared. The Disappeared had been picked up by the History Channels. It had been asked by the ambassador of Argentina to be the official document in human rights abuses at the United Nations. And I was very confident in my skills at that point. And my half-sister came to me and said, you know, would you like to make this movie about our grandmother? And I thought, well, that would be kind of a neat idea. Let's try to do it. And she said she'd fund it. Victoria Sanders was the executive producer and producer with me. And she basically said, you know, here's the book that I know you've read a long time ago. It's called The Road I've Traveled, which was her autobiography from 1993. She passed away in 1999. So there'd been 20 years almost, or 15, 17 years that had passed. And so basically, I took the book and I read it, and this is getting into the filmmaking kind of talk right now, which is I took the book, and because when you're dealing with a real person that you can't cheat their facts, you have to, you know, you have to stay with their facts. I would take each chapter and I would divide it into color codes. And I would say green was her relationships with the marriages. Purple would be her art world. Yellow would be the Harlequin eyeglass things. And so I made a huge design, a visionary design with the architecture of the book. And then that's when I started to get excited and say, well, she's been dead for 15 years, so she'd be 106 today, I think. So who's out there that's alive? Who can I interview? What relatives can be in this movie? And that's how I started the journey, which of course becomes a much bigger journey because you have to amass all those photographs, and you have to amass all that artwork, and you have to amass all the footage that I used to tell the story in an archival way. And so all that organization and building of the design of the architecture of the film and the structure and the arc of the movie is the exciting part. And that's when you really, as a filmmaker, are seeing what you're going to do in the next couple of years. And then it's about following through and getting all your interviews to pan out. But then the fun part is that things change. And people change their minds about what you thought they were going to say, and you don't always get what you're thinking you're going to get from their storyline. And then whatever you have to deal with. And so that was always the exciting part of making this movie is the people who I thought were going to be explosive about her sex life and things like that weren't the people I used, and the people that were I never thought I'd get that kind of response from them. Relatives that I knew were talking wildly about her sex life. So my grandmother, had become a very interesting person. And I will say this, when you know your grandmother, you play with her, you play chess with her, you go to movies with her, you take walks, you go to the zoo, you have fun. And that's one thing, is being the grandmother and the grandson. But when she is gone and you have to take all that literature, all those diaries, all that information and the photographs and your friends and relatives' information, that's when you really get to know who that person is. And that's when the journey really begins to know that as an adult, you really know that person, because we don't really know each other in the world. And when you pass and you have this entire mound of information to go through, and you're lucky enough to have that kind of information to look through it, then you can really get to know who Tina really, really was.
What was it like to read her diaries? What did you learn about?
Oh, they were saucy, very saucy. I had audio tapes which never even made it into the movie. Arguments with her third husband that were so very exciting about, the divorce that she needed to have, and the affairs, and it was all on the tapes. And it didn't fit in the movie because it didn't fit in the movie. But the diaries and the descriptions of what it's like for her to be with another man sexually, and how excited she was to be with someone that wasn't my grandfather. And I mean, it was quite an interesting. And if you watch the movie, which I hope everyone here will, you'll see that she married her fourth husband when she was, I believe she was 79 or 80, and that other person that she met, who was a Cuban refugee and was probably the best looking man you've ever seen in your entire life, and he was 41 years old. So she had a great sex life with her 41-year-old fourth husband.
He was the one in the trailer, by the way, that was saying, like, if I didn't perform at 100%, she'd kick me out of bed. At 80 years old. Was it hard for you to hear stories about your grandmother in that way?
No, not at all. No. Actually, we're a very, very colorful liberal family, and
I'd say so.
In the movie, you'll see hopefully that on Thursdays there was a nude in the living room, and people were sculpting and penciling nudes. And I mean, everyone I think in my family has been very exposed to nudity at an early age, but not in a vulgar and crass way. Nudity to us is a form of it's a Henry Moore sculpture. It's a Rodin sculpture. We see art in the world. That's how our family ticks. Yeah. We're all about aesthetics.
And your grandmother was so well documented. You said she had so many audio files of her personal arguments. She documented things herself through, her diaries. But there's also really beautiful B-roll of her from the 1920s, when it must have been very difficult to get a camera. Why was there so much footage of her from that time period, and who was taking that footage?
Great. The question is definitely it's something which most people can't find today, which is my great-grandfather, who was an heir. He was a magnate, a tobacco magnate, and he built the largest mansion in New York City. It's still the largest mansion freestanding in New York City, and he came here from Turkey penniless, and he became one of the richest men by the turn of the century. So in 1900, around then, 1907 or so, my great-grandfather came to this country penniless, but he became a tobacco magnate, and he started Schinasi cigarettes, and he became very, very wealthy. And one of the most interesting things of that time period, to me as a filmmaker, was he actually had a photographer at the time shoot his life in the mansion with his daughters. He had 3 daughters, and his wife, which he kept very nicely in a little, locked house. And he was a Turkish, very difficult person. So so there was a photographer which had great footage of their life as an heiress. And then later on, my grandfather, Morris Sanders, who was a terrific architect in New York City, that my grandmother married very, very, very young. When they went on their honeymoon, Morris Sanders was smart enough to take a 16mm camera with him, and he shot their whole honeymoon all over the world. Paris, Egypt, Morocco, on 16mm in 1928, 1929. So between those two footages, Clark and I had a nice couple of hours of footage to edit the first act of the movie, which was very heavy in the 1900 to 1940 something part of the movie, because the movie starts when she's born and it goes until she dies. So we had a tremendous amount of wonderful footage. And I have to say now that it was my uncle, Terry Sanders, who's an award-winning, Oscar-winning director, who donated that footage to us, and he made it possible to have that footage, which he had found in a garage somewhere. I asked him for footage, and it took him like almost a year to figure out that he had it, and he found it, and then my whole movie changed when I had that footage, you know, and that was the biggest breakthrough. And he also was able to give us the interview of Tina and him from 1991, and that was another huge breakthrough for us, which I would never probably been able to make that movie without her interview that he conducted in 1991. So between those two things helped a lot, and I was able to craft the vision of what the movie should look like and feel like. And Clark, who I can't live without in this project, really helped me get to the finish line with all the footage that we had.
Now, Clark, were you involved at all in the digitalization of the old 16mm footage?
I just received many DV tapes.
Oh, okay.
So it was already telecine what I got.
Oh, okay. So you'd already taken care of that, and then you got it to him. I was wondering, was there anything special that you had to do in changing, like, I guess, the rate of the footage?
Not especially. I don't know. I just dropped it in.
Just kind of dropped it in and then like went from there.
It's magic.
Technology,
but it's funny when he's talking about it. It's almost the opposite of most families, where there's kind of a gap from probably the late 30s. And in the 40s and the 50s, when you think kind of Super 8 cameras are becoming more prevalent, we don't have anything. And when we actually had to go out and buy stock footage, it was worse than the stuff that we had from that era. Which was
That's a very interesting point. Yes, we had such pristine footage that when because my whole goal was to tell the history of the United States from the 20th century through the lens of my grandmother, who had basically bumped into all these great events in her life and met so many interesting people, celebrities, worked with some of the most interesting minds. And so I kept my structure to have the enhancement of great events in the 20th century. And I felt like our footage from the first 30 years of her life were much more exciting. But,
you know, she really was. When I was watching the movie, she kind of struck me as this Forrest Gump type character. She's very happy-go-lucky and just lives life by her own rules and just floating through the decades, bumping into all of these very famous people and kind of getting involved with politics here and there. And at one point she was hiding people during the McCarthy era that were on trial and going to be arrested. What sorts of things did you find out about your grandmother that weren't sexual? That maybe something that happened to her historically that you were surprised by?
Well, I think, it kind of goes back to that point I made earlier that your grandmother is your grandmother, and she's the person that, talks to you about your love life or gives you, ideas about what you're going to do with your life. And I didn't really know that she had started her own Harlequin eyeglass business and that it took off, and she was the Lord & Taylor Designer of the Year recipient in 1939. I didn't know that she'd been really nominated for an Oscar for bringing a great amount of a story that showed the Jews being killed. I didn't know that she'd worked with Martin Luther King and developed a script with him, and that she was part of the Freedom for Dollars March. And I didn't know that she had hid John Barry, during the Red Scare and put her neck out. And I didn't know that she had really helped countless other people with their education. She paid for their education. She really was very generous with her money, and she didn't have to be. I mean, she easily could have been just like her sisters and gone to Paris and sat in a beautiful mansion in Paris and done nothing with her life. She wanted to reinvent herself, and I knew that about her, but I didn't know how personally involved she was with how she wanted to tackle projects until she was finished with them, and then she would kind of never look back at them. I mean, I didn't know that about her. She had that Forrest Gump, I guess, part, and it was nice. And of course, the sexual is kind of important because her art is sexual, and she is sensual, and she grew up in a very repressed, huge mansion, which she couldn't really, you know, show that side of her. And then in her art, she's able to show it, and now I understand why. And I also understand more about her relationship with her father, which is a very fascinating relationship, and that's what, you know, some of her husbands have to live up to. And it's no easy task to live up to her father's shoes.
Her story is so ripe with emotion, and it's so important to carry that throughout the film. Clark, how were you able to help achieve that, the richness of the story, while also keeping it very much within, you know, the meter of the storyline of, you know, trying to tell things historically as well?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a balance. I mean, definitely we use the music and kind of historical events as to kind of smooth out some transitions where there's kind of a huge time jump. And I hope it works in the end cut to kind of smooth things over. And also the source material, we were so lucky to have so much stuff of Altina.
Now, you said before that there was a period of time where you had to fill it in with a lot of stock footage. Were you guys, did you get most of that stock footage from a certain place, or did you guys have to get creative in finding certain things that you don't want to show the same stuff that gets shown in every other historical documentary?
Right. Yeah.
How did you guys get creative with finding some different things?
Well, do you want to answer that, or you want me to answer?
Well, for my sake, usually we would just rip things truthfully from other documentaries or YouTube, and then license them, which Pete did. I'm glad I wasn't involved with that, because I'm sure it was an absolute nightmare. Would license them after the fact.
Yeah, kind of what we did, and a little before Clark came on, was I would find the feeling of what the unit was about, and then I would take the unit apart, and I would find something on the internet, or I would go to my library, which I have an extensive DVD library of history, movies and things, or I would find it online somewhere, some PBS show or something, and I would just kind of storyboard in what I wanted to see with the feeling. And then, of course, when we got serious about finalizing the rough cut, then we put in the actual, what we thought was a good-looking shot to make it all work. And then, when it was time to really try to finish the final cut, which was going to go for the festivals, then I had to go to every single archival library. I mainly used Corbis and Film Archives. And what I did was, and this is totally like old school, but I took a piece of paper that was about 6 feet wide by like 4 feet long. And I took a pencil and I drew in every single shot and had the time code for what I believed was the right shot, because it changes. And that gave me, from a pencil and pen way, to see the whole movie, the whole timeline, so that I could see what shots I was using. Because when you do it on the computer, you can't really see the meta picture. So that way, when I put the shots in that I purchased, which is a nightmare to do it, because I probably had over like 20 to 30, about 30 minutes worth of archival. I had to purchase 30 minutes, and usually you purchase by the 4 and 5 seconds. So you do the math. 1 minute can be up to, what is that, like 15 shots or something?
Yeah.
So you're purchasing 15 shots at 4 seconds a pop. So if you're doing 20 minutes, do the math, could be, 20 times 60, that's like, I don't know, or 20, that's like 400 seconds or something. Yeah. I don't know the math, but anyway, It's a lot.
I'm like, I want to do the math, but I'm like, I'm not. I'm just
There are
not.
hundreds of stuff.
It's hundreds and hundreds and
We're
hundreds
filmmakers,
of
we're
4
not
seconds.
mathematicians.
Yeah. And you have trouble with all that stuff because Martin Luther King, for example, for 13 seconds cost $5,000. A shot of Walter Cronkite taking off his glasses as he's crying about the death of Martin Luther King, which to me was very important to have that, is $5,000. But other shots are $250 or $500 for 4 seconds. So as you can see, archival stuff for documentarians, it gets pretty high up there, and we're not even talking about music yet. I mean, music can be easily, for the kind of stuff that I wanted in, could be in the 100,000s for just music. So.
Were there any budgetary concerns? You said that your half-sister executive produced the film, but did she put you on a cap of any sort?
Unfortunately. We did a version with some of the best music pieces that ever have been recorded by the best orchestra, and I'm talking Benny Goodman to Tommy Dorsey to Bill Frisell, and we made that movie with that music, and then we sold it to the distributor and to the festivals and to all the places where it needed to go. And then I had to go to work because I knew that it was a success, and I knew that I was going to have it was going to be released. And all those are steps that one has to take as a filmmaker. You have to go to the festivals, then you have to get recognized, then you have to get notes, and then you have to try to get a good agent, and then you have to try to get a distributor who wants it, and then you get a theatrical release that goes with it. So those are all evolutionary steps. And then you pay for the music. Because you don't pay for the music before because you don't know what kind of deal you're going to get. So why would you want to pay for a a 10-year contract with Sony on one song when your distributor is only going to use your movie for 2 years? So why would you want to pay 8 years extra on licensing that music?
Right.
So what happened was our music was too expensive. So I went back with a composer, and mostly with me finding the music to get to the bottom line that we needed to get to, and then we came out with something that we really liked.
Wow.
But I had to do the music twice, and I basically had to edit the music twice too.
Wow.
I had to edit the movie twice with Clark.
That's a lot of time that
So
you
it
had to
was-
invest. How long did you work on this whole project?
We were talking about this before, and to be honest, neither of us really knows, because it'd be for a couple months at a time over a period of what's been now 4 years, 5 years?
Yes.
So,
yes.
A long time.
But but really, it's not that long because you're waiting. You're waiting for the agent to come along. You're waiting for the festivals to react. You're waiting to submit yourself to the festivals. You're waiting for a distributor to come on, and you're waiting for your big break in the theater to come. And luckily, Altina had all those things. And thank God, I was in Sarasota one night showing the movie. And a guy walked in and saw the movie and came up to me and said, "I'd like you to take a meeting with me." And that was Josh Braun, the super agent of all super agents of New York City and Los Angeles, the best agent of documentaries. He saw the movie, liked it enough, and he signed me. And that was my biggest break. That if it wasn't for Josh Braun, this movie would never be theatrically released or distributed.
You've had a very, I think, much more traditional experience than a lot of the filmmakers that come in and talk to us. A lot of filmmakers are self-distributing now. Did you think about that at any point of the way, or were you always focused on getting that right agent?
Well, I self-distributed The Disappeared, which is about the dirty war in Argentina and the kids that were kidnapped and the military that killed 30,000 people. And what I did with that movie, which was an Argentine movie, and it was made in Argentina, and it was produced through a distributor in Argentina, and I got the PR and the movie theaters and the distribution deal on my own to release it all and to do that all on my own dime. And so since I paid for that movie 100%, I was able to come back to the States and then sell the movie to all the academic institutions and almost over 1,000 university libraries that purchased that movie and make my money back. And so I am extremely aware of what it's like to do self-distributing. And I can, now that I've seen both worlds and I've lived in both worlds, they are both so satisfying and they are both so essential. And I think that anybody that can do both at the same time it's in their best interest. Do the traditional route, have handlers, and also have your hand in the pot so that you can make your own decisions and guide your movie the way that you want it guided.
So you're very hands-on then. You're not just a director. You really want to see it
No. I
through
conceive it, I produce it, I direct it, I help with the editing, and then I market it, and then I make sure the baby goes to college, and then I usually am tired of looking at the baby, and I don't cry when it goes to college anymore. And I'm done with that beautiful baby, and hopefully she graduates and becomes a neuroscientist somewhere. But I don't worry about the baby after
start making
college.
a new baby.
That's right. I'm already in the crib with another.
Now you know how involved he is. This is your first feature, Clark. How hard, or was it difficult at all to work with someone who had such a clear vision, or was he really receptive of your ideas? And do you feel like you were able to make a creative contribution?
I think we worked together and we found kind of a creative balance of kind of finding. Well, I'm curious to get Pete's take on this, but it didn't come instantly. And again, it was my first thing I've ever edited. Of this scope.
Because I brought Clark in. He had no real experience as a film editor. He'd edited trailers, he'd edited other things, video game, things like that. So I had my vision, and I thought that, I just needed somebody to listen to me as a sounding board. And I didn't expect him to have an artistic vision with me when we started together. I just wanted him to do the technical things correctly and fast so that I could make my decisions, change my mind, come together in different ways. And I was very, very happily surprised to know that Clark has excellent aesthetic taste, has amazing values that he brings as a person and as a film editor into a project. And he understood the story well enough, and because he'd done some of the logging and capturing and stuff with me, he was able to capture it, the spirit, and work with me. And we definitely had great little spats and arguments at times. And we loved to go at it. But at the end of the day, we knew that we were both doing what's best for the film, and it never got personal. And he has a great work ethic too. So one thing that we did together, which was kind of neat, is that we would say, because you kind of work on a timer. It's like, you can't just take forever on one scene. So you say, listen, in 10 minutes, we're going to finish the scene no matter what. So I would take the scene, I would take, A, B, C, D, E, and F shots, and then I would rearrange them my way, and then Clark would rearrange them his way, and then we would have the timer, and then 7 minutes later, we would say, okay, now show me yours, I show you mine. And then we would both look at each other's, and then I would say, I don't like yours. And he would say, I don't like yours either. And I'd say, okay, well then let's use C and B and D and F, and then we'll make it work. And then that's kind of one of the ways that we were able to get through, because you change an image and you put another image before and after something, it changes the meaning of the scene. So it was truly and because he was a first-time editor, I was relaxed because I had worked with the great Barry Malkin before in The Disappeared, who was an excellent editor in all the Godfather movies, and it's kind of stressful to work with somebody who's such a master, because they know exactly what they want, they know exactly what they're going to do, and they don't really give you a lot of breathing room to give any kind of director notes or anything, really. So I was just really happy to kind of work with Clark, because he's very smart and he could deliver things that the great editors could do, and I didn't have to feel pushed off my own movie.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, you talked about The Disappeared before, which was a very impactful movie on a large scale because it was shedding light on a very deep trauma that affected an entire country. Now, Altina is a film about a spunky grandma who's wreaking bohemian havoc on the New York scene in the 1930s, and also happens to be your grandma. What type of audience are you looking for Altina, in contrast to the type of audience that was attracted to The Disappeared?
Right, there are completely different audiences.
Yeah.
The Disappeared obviously is for people that understand how persecution and understand how governments can get too powerful and they can completely take over society, and how one big historical event can completely change the lives of individuals and destroy a generation of thinkers and young people. And so the Altina story was very colorful and creative, but it was individualistic. It was her individualistic endeavors that were surrounded by many historical events in the 20th century, whereas The Disappeared was one historical event and one person's life who was shattered by it under the umbrella of 500 children and 30,000 people who died with that situation. And so I felt like the audiences for both The Disappeared and Altina are going to be people who love to think, and they love to be entertained by something that they're not quite aware of, and they're going to look for, in my case, Altina, who is everyone's grandmother, but she's also somebody who did things that other people may never have done in their lifetime. And so they're going to see that as either inspirational, or they're going to see that as a curiosity that they're going to want to know, well, what is it like to be an heiress in 1900 and live in a huge mansion and have a carriage and have people throw eggs and tomatoes at you when you're 12 years old in your perfectly white ivory little dress? You know, what is it like to have the Harlequin eyeglasses and invent a crazed movement that millions of women will now wear those kinds of eyeglasses? I mean, those are things that the audiences would love about Altina. And The Disappeared is for an audience that has a history background.
Absolutely. Now, how did The Disappeared come about? How did you end up making that film?
Well, that's a loaded question, and Clark's father has a lot to do with the outcome of that movie. So, well, when I was younger and I was in my I was looking for a job as a journalist, and I wanted to go to NYU School of Journalism and Documentary Filmmaking. I went down to Buenos Aires because that's where I'm from. I've lived there for a few years. I'm obviously from here, but I'm from Texas. But I went down to Argentina to string a couple of stories and bring them back and get a job at CNN International, which is what I wanted to do. And one night, I was at the White House, if you will, of the president of Argentina's place, and a journalist said, "I'm out of here. I got to go to an interview. I got to go get a press conference at midnight." I said, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I got to go. This kid that just was found out his parents were murdered and his whole life is in shambles. He doesn't know who he is. He hasn't even met his biological relatives yet. And tonight he's going to meet everybody." So I said, "Jeez, I got to check this out." So I go to the press conference. Sure enough, tall, beautiful-looking guy named Horacio Pietragala is there, and I interviewed him until 3 or 4 in the morning after his press conference. And then in that same week, it just like hit me because I have a very long history with Argentina, and I grew up during the dictatorship there, and I have a most amazing best friend whose father they put a bomb in his apartment in the 80s, and he left, and so I knew very well the story of The Disappeared, and I knew very well that my grandmother from Argentina was a dentist. The first female dentist in Buenos Aires was the dentist to the military in the 1970s. And so I knew the story very, very well. And so when I got to get to this kid, and he gave me his story, in that same week, I was able to get an interview with the prosecutor of all the military generals against him. I was able to get to the head of the Abuelas organization. I was able to get to the general who pardoned all the other generals to go into jail. And I got some other folks, and I brought all that information into a 5-minute cassette. And I went to the NYU Dean of Admission, because my grades weren't so great from being a college kid and, you know, liking the girls and liking the alcohol too much. And I said, "Hey, I really want to go to NYU. Will you look at this tape? And if you don't like this tape, I really don't belong in your school." And they looked at the tape, and she said, after 6 months, she said, "You're in, you're in." So I got into the school, and then I used my 2 years to take that movie, and I got the Academy of Motion Pictures and Television gave me a $5,000 grant, which was a big deal back then, and I was able to keep going and making that movie into a 90-minute version, which after I graduated, I screened it, and then the whole world got to see it after that when the History Channel picked it up, and the History International Channel. And what makes it so interesting is that The Disappeared, which is about the most horrific things that happened to women. They were raped, they were thrown out of airplanes alive. The minute that their child came out of the womb, the military gave them to other parents, military parents, to be raised under secretive guises. And his father was a diplomat in Washington and moved to Argentina at the time of the Dirty War. And his father, Clark's father, Tex Harris, single-handedly helped hundreds of people in the 70s to get out of that situation and to move to safer ground or to move to another country. And so what happened was, after the movie came out, I was in Washington screening it at the embassy in Washington, and Tex Harris and I finally got to meet, and he's like taller than this guy, and he's bigger than life. And I said, Tex Harris, you know, you're a real idol of mine. And he said, oh, that's great, thank you so much, I loved your movie, yada, yada. I said, oh, great. He said, but you know what? If you do another movie, hire my son. He's a young editor and he wants to be in the show, in the movie business. And so that's why I picked up the phone, and the next time I made a movie, I thought, well, maybe this kid needs a break. So that's how Disappeared was made.
That's really cool. Now, you said that it started as a 5-minute just short that you wanted to use to get into school, and you were able to get all those interviews in 1 week. It takes
not all. I did over
you said that
280 interviews over the course of 7 years. But just for the 1 week to get into grad school, I filmed 5 of the most important people that you could get in Argentina at the time. And I had them in my back pocket. So I knew that I had to think about this as the film I had to make. But later on, I got more interviews than anyone I know.
Yeah.
280 people were in my stockpile.
That's ambitious.
And the military generals, I'm the only North American and South American journalist that has the confessions and the access to the interviews of the military generals who committed genocide and killed 30,000 people. And that is why the movie is different than any other.
I know what it takes for me to just set up 2 interviews in a month. Like, just how are you able to get that kind of access?
I think that it's harder in this country. I try to get things going in this country. I try to call our representatives up and congressmen and senators, and and it's so hard. It's like, I can't believe how hard it is in this country. You got to go through so much red tape to get to somebody. But in Argentina, it's just like in Italy and in other foreign countries, if you are surefire about what you want, and you have somebody that has some connection to, a powerful place, you can get through and get to those powerful people. And because I was telling a story that people really wanted me to tell at that time, because in 2003 is when they lifted all the laws that they had against telling the story, and finally trials were starting to happen again. That's why I was lucky as a filmmaker to get people who wanted to talk about it, and those were the highest people too.
That's amazing. Well, we've got some audience questions, so we're going to get to you guys here. Let me see. Got to log into meet.ps. All right.
Are there any questions that you want to ask me else otherwise about?
I have a couple more questions. Yeah. We'll see if we have time for them after the audience questions.
I may have gone a different route.
No, it's totally fine. It went great. Okay, so we've got some audience questions here. People are really eager to know more. The first one from the audience is, what were the biggest advantages and biggest struggles coming from 2 generations of Academy Award winners?
Oh, that's a great question. You would think that they would play a big role in your psyche, and you would think that kind of pressure of having your grandmother nominated, my father with 2 Oscars and many other awards, and my uncle with 3 Oscars, and an aunt with 2 Oscars, and a cousin with an Oscar nomination, you would think that it would be in my mind, but it actually is not, because I started doing this when I was much later in life. I don't feel like I don't beat my tune to what they did. I don't feel like there is something there that I have to prove to them or to anyone else, because I've worked long enough on myself, and I have a very secure upbringing, a very secure sense of self, and I don't feel like I had any pressure or like I owe, that I owe, I don't know if the O is, but I don't feel like I'm that, I mean, it's an honor to have that kind of legacy around me. It obviously does affect me. It obviously plays a part in who I am, but I am my own guy and I make my own stories because I want to make those stories. And The Disappeared was bigger than me and was bigger than my life. And I made that movie for that reason. And Altina, The Disappeared is an homage to my grandmother from Argentina. That was my first movie. I did it for my maternal side of my life. And Altina was obviously a homage to my grandmother from the paternal side. And the story, again, is more important than thinking, oh, well, you know, I want to be a filmmaker too, like all of them or something.
Yeah. Do you feel that they supported you when you decided to make that crossover? Because you had other careers before this.
Yes, I did. I feel, well, my sister Victoria supported me because she paid for the film and wanted this movie to be made, and she felt that after The Disappeared, it was the right movie for us to make together, and that was a wonderful thing that she did. So yes, I feel like I got the support, and Uncle Terry, he also gave me the footage, and I think, you know, he hoped that I would honor his mother, which is not an easy task. So I feel like I got to where I wanted to go with the movie, and I think I told the story that was the right story for her.
What was a part, okay, I'll start that again. Another question they have is, what was a part of her story that you wanted to include in the film, but just didn't fit in the narrative? That's a good one, guys.
It is a good one. So that would be, well, I mean, I wanted to include more about my father and my relationship with my father, because my father died when I was 18, and that was a real hole in my heart. And so I really wanted to have more people talking about my father and her relationship with my father. I wanted to know what that was really all about. And that's something I won't really ever get to know, because no one really talked about it, or they didn't know much about it. The other thing that I, you know, was the sex, the sex of Tina was so exciting, and getting to know her and knowing that she was just a little rabbit. She loved sex, and she loved, you know, younger men, and she loved and she just loved to have all that. And so I had some really great diaries, and then of course you can't really, I don't narrate my movies. I let everyone decide on their own what's going to happen. So I keep myself out of the movies, I hope. I mean, I'm in the movie because I'm subjectively pushing the movie along, but I couldn't bring information in that I couldn't show. And I'm not going to like tell an interviewee to say this. It was in the diary, you know, say this for me. So basically, her sex life was very colorful, and those tapes, those nasty tapes between her third husband and her, those were juicy, delicious, you know, psychological rants with each other, which, you know, you're not used to, like hearing your grandmother psychologically rant in the middle of, you know, tapes like that. So,
Clark, what about you? Was there any footage that you saw that you were really fighting for, that you felt like you wanted in there but just didn't quite fit?
I don't know. I mean, I think all of the beautiful B-roll and the interview stuff, the really cherry stuff, is in the cut.
Yeah.
So
it made it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We scraped it pretty hard.
We scraped it pretty hard. That's good.
What made you really make the big decision to go from an actor to a filmmaker?
Oh, I think I didn't really have a choice. You know, I was one of those guys that wanted it so badly early in my life. As an actor, I went to Stella Adler. I went to the Folger Shakespeare, did a couple of seasons there. And I did some off-Broadway at the Lincoln Center, and I got a good agent, came out here, started making money as a commercial actor, became the Mercedes man for a little while. I did those ads, you know, the Super Bowl ads. There was like the guy with Sybil Shepherd driving the little, you know, car and all that. And then it was like I just wasn't getting enough work. I wasn't getting enough attention as an actor. And I just was not right for it. You know, it's like, you know, what's interesting that I learned later in life is that you can think that you want something so badly, but you're not really, really meant to do it. And you have to kind of just figure out a way to understand that about yourself. And I was not meant to be an actor, even though for 10 years I thought that was the case. And then I was lucky enough to believed that I could still be a journalist. And so the journalism was the next step. These are baby steps, you know. It takes 20 years to become a filmmaker. It takes 20 years to become an actor. Anything that you're really going to be good at, it's going to take 20 years. So everything that I used for my journalism career, I used my acting background. And everything that I used for my documentary filmmaking experiences, I used from being a local reporter and from being an actor and asking the questions that really matter, because that's how you ask yourself the same questions as a character. So everything was perfectly designed. I was supposed to fail as an actor, and I was supposed to fail as a local reporter, and then hopefully this is how my life was supposed to be, which was to be a filmmaker for bigger pictures.
Well, you've found a lot of success in it so far. So many similarities between the two films that you made. They're both documentaries and they're both historical. Wait, what should I say?
I'll just answer the question.
Okay, you know what? Let me ask it, Dan. Okay, so the films that you made are very contrasting. They're totally different, but there are a lot of similarities as well. What would you say links the two films together?
Well, it's when you look at the context of The Disappeared, for example, The Disappeared it's one historical event, which was a dictatorship that completely took over all aspects of society and destroyed thousands, 30,000 lives, and destroyed the fabric, the quilt of society. It was totally shattered. And one child that I stayed with for 4 or 5 years had to recompose himself and rebuild himself up to find his true identity. And he had to go through all these stages in this one historical context, one event that happened in Argentina. Not the whole history of Argentina, mind you. I mean, if you know anything about the history of Argentina, it's a magnificent culture. But this is a black eye during the Dirty War, what happened. So this is one event. And so it's recomposing and reconstructing, but also recomposing and reconstructing that historical event. And taking one event and making, you have to decompose it and you have to build it back up so that everyone can understand the context of what that one historical event was in the entire context of the history of Argentina and Latin America at that time, and what was happening in North America, which was Vietnam was happening and civil rights movements were happening. So when you look at that one historical event and then you compare it, juxtapose it, counterpoint it to what happened in Tina's life, which is that she was one individualist with individualistic aspirations, and she had many different lives, like this Forrest Gump character you kind of allude to. She went through different decades, different phases. She reinvented herself constantly, but the historical context always changed. It was not one historical one event. It was many historical events in the 20th century in the United States through the lens of Altina, who was a messenger and a carrier of the time, but she had her own individualistic. So I unpeeled the onion of, I decomposed my grandmother, and then I built her back up a little bit, but not so much. I mean, she was kind of a made product. Okay. I didn't really decompose her like I did the other character. Yeah. But you still have to get to know her, and you still have to understand her, and understand her art most importantly. And so that's how the two worlds of The Disappeared and Altina have similarities.
Interesting. We've got a couple more questions here from the. Here's a good one. From the audience wants to know: would you ever make Altina into a fictional film?
Yeah, I'm sure we kicked that idea around over coffee. Who would play the role? Who would be the right Joan Allen? You know, who? I mean, I would. Yes. That was a fun thought because when you see the film, you'll understand. There's so much going on. There's so much excitement going on, and somebody like that could easily be made into a narrative. But I can't think of exactly who would be. You know, Marion Seldes would be good. She's a little old now. Please forgive me, Marion. I'm just trying to think of, who's, I mean, it'd have to be somebody that's in there, like, you'd have to have two Altinas, by the way. You need an Altina before she was 50, and you need an Altina who's 60. You know? So.
Now, because she looked young even when she was in her 80s. She didn't look like she was in her 80s. Now,
she was very well manicured. She had a big staff that helped her look good. She had a masseuse, a cook. She had a husband that did whatever she wanted. So there's, you know, life was the breeze.
Now, is documentary filmmaking it for you? Is that your path, or do you ever see yourself making a narrative film?
I mean, anybody that knows anything about the art of filmmaking knows that you use the same exact formula and you use the same exact technique and you go through the same exact process of when you make a documentary or when you make a narrative. You just have a script or you don't have a script. And so a narrative would be wonderful. I do feel like a narrative is something which is more expensive to make, to me. I always feel like, you know, documentaries, I can see how you can finish them, but with a narrative, I feel like you need a studio and you need a lot of, you need your extras to show up on time. You need your.
You should subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Oh,
We've got lots of filmmakers that do it without studios.
Oh, good.
You can learn all about it.
Yeah, I'm always like when Wonderment. You know, when I show up with my crew, I have a fantastic director of photography named Brian Sarkinen, who's been with me on and off for 10 years, and. You know, it's just me and the guy, and we go and we see a person, and then we're PIs. I'm a PI. I'm just running around town trying to get information. But when you're a narrative film director, you got to have 20, 30 people in the room, and they've all got to be there, and they've all got to be paid, and they've all got to, you know, get the shot. And that to me sounds much more stressful than making a documentary.
We've got one final question. This one is not from the audience. It is the question that I ask everyone that comes in here, and that is, what have you learned during the making of these last two films that you would want to share with new filmmakers? And this goes to you too, Clark.
Why don't you take that question, Mr. Clark?
Well, I'd just say editing is the first feature I've ever edited, and I'd say rather than fight about your idea, just do it immediately, even if you think it's the worst idea in the world. Just do it, and then just say nothing, and then move forward, rather than, I feel like just do whatever the director says right away, and then kind of let the cut speak for itself or not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Clark would do that. He would let me hang myself. He was really good at that. I would say, no, that's not what I want. I'm going to do it my way, and then it would be on the screen for a couple of minutes, and then we'd go back over it, and we would, you know, look back 10 minutes back, and then we'd go through it, and I would go, oh God, that is the worst idea ever. Clark, we're doing it your way, you know. I mean, that is exactly what Clark was so great at, is that he didn't give me the ego, and I know that he was biting his tongue, and I know that sometimes he just didn't think that what I was doing was the right thing. But it's great to, like, not fight over it, but just, like, the truth comes out in the end. And it doesn't feel right, it's not gonna look right, it's not gonna be right. So in the end of the whole day, it might take a couple days, you might have to look at the footage 3 to 50 times, you never know. But you're going to know, with the music later added, that it doesn't feel right. And then you're just going to have to redo it again. And that's one thing I learned a lot with Clark, is that, you know, we would redo stuff a lot. And we would rethink things a lot. And we would make sure that if it's not feeling it, then we have to change it. And I think the way a narrative filmmaker does, I want everybody to be entertained every 6 seconds. I have a 6-second rule. This is a good point for a young filmmaker. I have a 6-second rule. If after 6 seconds you want to grab that remote and change the station, then you need to change the edit. You need to either shorten it, or you need to lengthen it, or you need to change it all around. But if in 6 seconds you're kind of like lull, then you got to do something. And the other thing that's really important, because I was there, you know, I was a completely unemployed actor when I was 30, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And at 45, I'm very, very happy with where I am right now. And it all comes down to just, if a story hits you, and the story is bigger than you, and the story means something to the world possibly, you've got to do everything in your brains and everything else to get that message. No matter how you figure it out, no matter what you do, the world will respond to you if you're that focused. And you don't need to be an heir. You don't need to have, you know, the right connections in Wall Street or in Greenwich, Connecticut, or in Hollywood or whatever. You can get things going. You can make it. You can do things, and you really just should not give up on yourself. Just patience is the hardest thing that filmmakers have to learn, and that's what Clark helped me with a lot. And patience is how you get the job done.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much, Peter and Clark. And thank you guys for tuning in. We are so grateful for your support. And the show is free because people like you took action. They said, I like that, and they hit the subscribe button. So we want to keep bringing you awesome, inspiring stories about filmmakers. And if you want to see more of these, just subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's WMM Originals and our iTunes podcast, How We Make Movies. And I'll see you next time.